Good news that definitely needs to be explained. India is finally giving up Russian oil and agrees to buy more American and Venezuelan oil. United States President Donald Trump announced an agreement with India on the complete cessation of oil purchases from the Russian Federation. He believes this will help end Russia's war on Ukraine. Trump said that he discussed trade and ending the war between Ukraine and Russia with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. As a sign of gratitude, Trump sharply reduced tariffs on goods from India and also called for more companies to invest in that country instead of China. At the same time, the European Commission published official plans for a complete phase-out of Russian oil and petroleum products the day before. As a result, Russia is left with only one major buyer, China, which is already demanding that Moscow significantly increase discounts on oil, otherwise Beijing refuses to buy it. Well, it seems that Putin has outplayed everyone once again. But here it's worth cooling down a bit right away and saying that it will actually be quite difficult for India to completely give up Russian oil. But on the other hand, such a statement from Trump sends a clear signal to investors that it's possible to invest in the Venezuelan oil sector because there is already a buyer for this oil. So, let's figure this out. My name is Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic together. But before we start, please subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and write any comment under this episode. And if you want to support the work of our YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation by using the links and details in the description of this video. By the way, there's also a link to my Telegram channel, Pechiy News, in the description. Subscribe to it as well. So, United States President Donald Trump announced an agreement with India to stop purchasing oil from the Russian Federation. According to him, this will help stop Russia's war against Ukraine. He said that on February 2nd he discussed trade and ending Russia's war against Ukraine with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Quote, Modi. He agreed to stop buying Russian oil and to buy much more oil from the United States and possibly from Venezuela. This will help end the war in Ukraine, which is still ongoing and in which thousands of people are dying every week. Interestingly, Trump clearly liked this deal because his feed on his social network Traso Nushel was filled with photos of Indian landmarks and pictures from Indian magazines with Trump and Modi on the cover. Trump added that he had reached an agreement with Modi on a trade deal between the United States and India which takes effect immediately. And according to this agreement, the United States will charge a reduced reciprocal tariff of 18% instead of 25%. And don't forget, the extra 25% tariff is also being removed. In short, it was 50, now it's 18. In addition, Trump noted that India will reduce its tariffs and non-tariff barriers against the United States to zero. But it should be admitted that for India, a complete refusal to buy Russian oil will be a difficult task at the moment. India imports about 1.3 million barrels of Russian oil per day. Even several months after Trump imposed tariffs on the Indian market, Russian oil accounts for more than a third of all of India's imports. Yes, India cut its purchases by 500,000 barrels a day, but the volume remains significant at 1.3 million. Trump stated that he had reached an agreement with the Prime Minister of India to replace Russian oil with oil from Venezuela and the United States of America. Venezuelan oil matches Russian oil in quality. It's heavy and sour. It is ideal for producing products like fuel oil and diesel fuel, which Indian refineries are already prepared to process. Refineries don't need retooling after Russian oil, so there are no issues. However, the length of the transition period is unclear. Venezuela's oil infrastructure is in a dire state, and it will require tens of billions of dollars in investments to restore it to its previous production levels. More than 3 million barrels per day, which Venezuela achieved before the socialist government came to power in 1999. And here, it's important to understand the numbers. At the moment, India buys more oil from Russia than Venezuela produces in total, so a complete replacement of Russian oil with oil from Venezuela or the United States would require significant investments. Although economists have already started counting the money here. The point is that if Trump gives guarantees that India will buy huge volumes of oil from Venezuela, investors will have an incentive to move faster to take a position in Venezuela's oil sector. Previously, Indian government officials, on the contrary, defended the purchase of Russian oil, calling it a necessary condition for the country's energy security. India is the third largest oil consumer in the world, and Russia is the nearest next supplier. India relies on its oil to sustain its rapidly growing economy, which is fueled by the largest population in the world. Also, don't forget that Russian oil is traded at a significant discount. Officially, it's about $16 per barrel compared to Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries or United States oil. What makes it hard for India to leave such a profitable deal? It's important to note that even after this agreement with Donald Trump, India can still violate sanctions and buy Russian oil. Delhi has already used countless ways to bypass the sanctioning authorities, and the shadow fleet, for example, is still in operation. However, oil prices are generally falling, which means that the price difference between permitted and unsanctioned oil has decreased. So, when oil prices were high, it made sense to buy discounted oil from Russia. But as oil prices have fallen, this advantage is no longer as significant. Considering that Indian exporters suffered from Trump's tariffs, it became easier to stop buying this Russian oil. Trump announced that Indian goods would immediately be subject to an 18% tariff instead of 50%. That is the rate that included the additional 25% tariff imposed by Trump in August of last year. To persuade India to stop buying Russian oil, it should be noted that Indian goods were subject to some of the highest customs duties imposed by the Trump administration. Trump called Narendra Modi one of my best friends and stated that the Prime Minister of India agreed to reduce Indian tariffs on American goods to zero, and to remove unspecified barriers, including a tariff reduction, although Trump did not specify which barriers would be removed. These often include special taxes on services provided by American companies which exist in India, or value-added tax on goods. And Trump made another interesting statement. I'll just quote him here. India also promised to invest in American goods at a much higher level, in addition to investments of $500 billion in energy, technology, agriculture, and the coal industry with the United States, as well as in other sectors. I still urge you to approach this news critically, because we should not forget that literally just last week, the European Union signed a long-awaited free trade agreement with India. And Donald Trump was clearly in a hurry to make his own deal with Narendra Modi. Because if India grants preferential access to the European Union, it will affect American business, and Trump was in a big hurry to show that the American market is also good. Don't leave us. There was a risk that India would simply redirect at least part of its flow of goods to Europe. Why ship goods to America with a 50% tariff when Europe has none and offers more profit? That's why Trump may have hurried to sign a deal with India to balance this position. By the way, he was really hurt by the fact that the first agreement like this was signed with New Delhi. Well, if we're already talking about Europe, here's another important piece of European news. On Monday, the European Commission confirmed in the European Union's official journal its plan to fully ban oil imports from Russia by the end of 2027. In the published statement, the European Commission stated that the goal is to prevent significant risks to security and energy dependence. The document emphasizes the commitment to gradually phase out all remaining oil imports from the Russian Federation, as per the Versailles Declaration. And here I should note that earlier, as part of the Repower European Union plan, the goal was set to stop using Russian pipeline gas by the end of 2027 as well. And according to the European Commission itself, dependence on Russian energy resources has already decreased sharply. The share of Russian oil in imports has dropped from 27%. In early 2022, it was about 27%, but by 2024, it's around 3%. These 3% mostly go to Hungary and Slovakia. According to forecasts, imports of Russian gas have already decreased to 13% by the end of 2025 compared to 19% in 2024 and by the end of 2027. All indicators of oil and gas from the Russian Federation in Europe should be 0%. So for now I can note that yes, this is a long-term story, but nevertheless it is gradually bringing results. As we can see, the global market is really being reshaped right before our eyes. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell. And don't forget to like if you want to support the channel's work. You already know that all the links and details are in the description for this video. That's it for Subway Limanka's forecast. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.